Hi, everybody. Welcome to Blockchain and AI. This is a session where we're going to be talking about new technologies that, quite frankly, you probably are sick of hearing about, mostly because you haven't figured out how to start using them in your own practices right now. So if you want to learn that, this is the right room for you. I want to welcome everybody. I'm Joshua Lenon. I'm the lawyer in residence at Clio. How many people have heard of me? So yes, lawyer in residence is my actual job title. I did make it up. But for the last 6 years, I've had the privilege to work with Clio on researching new technologies, how they impact the practice of law, and why we should be investing in learning those technologies ourselves. And I'm very excited to welcome to the stage two leaders in blockchain and machine learning, the first of which is Dat Nguyen. He is a former patent examiner for the US Patent Office, a patent attorney, and now the vice president of special projects at Sagewise. And I'm not going to spoil everything that Sagewise does, but it's a really interesting product that takes a look at what legal needs from blockchain rather than the other way around. What can blockchain do for legal? And they're building an innovative product. And he's going to teach you a high-level overview of blockchain and how it then can be used by you in your practice today. And following him will be Jake Heller, who is another attorney. He practiced out in California with Ropes and Gray, and then went back to Stanford Law School to join their Stanford Codex program, which is an innovative incubator for legal technology startups. And he has built a phenomenal tool called Casetext that employs machine learning to help make legal research easier. And they're going to dive into those technologies, their specific use cases, and why you should be looking at these technologies as a part of your practice today. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dat to teach you a little bit more about legal tech, blockchain, and smart contracts. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. That was a great introduction, and I'm happy to be here. I'm sure everyone's heard about blockchain and cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, so I won't go over that. What I'm really interested in sharing with you today is how all of that technology may impact the legal sector. So just to cover some background for folks who may not know. So blockchain, the easiest way to think about blockchain is that it's an immutable ledger and that it's distributed about, between computers all around the world pretty much. And so there's a lot of other technology that I can go into, but I'll spare you the detail for now. And so with the adoption of with the use of a blockchain and a distributed ledger, there's a lot of benefits from that. And one of the benefits is like document authentication. And so many states are actually moving forward now and passing laws and regulations that make blockchain records admissible in court. So Vermont, New Mexico, Arizona are the first three. Nevada, they have a proposal, and the Supreme Court of China has already made blockchain records admissible. And so what is a blockchain record? And so essentially a blockchain record, one of the first use cases that we're proposing is e-signatures and document authentication on blockchain. So essentially, I think everybody here has probably used an e-signature solution like DocuSign. You simply sign it, and what happens is you might get a receipt with the email, the date, an IP address. It's not very secure. It doesn't really provide you much authentication other than the fact that somebody pressed some buttons at a certain date, right? And so there's a lot of room for, I guess, malfeasance, perhaps, doctoring documents. I've actually talked to some folks in the real estate sector where this happens pretty often, where a client potentially signs the document and then the underwriter comes in and changes the PDF, changes the request for like $1 million to $1.5 million, submits it, and later on there may be some dispute over who signed the document, what they actually signed. And currently, if you have an e-signature solution, all you're going to have is a paper that says, this was signed at a certain time, and now you have to go through the very difficult process of essentially authenticating it and then proving which one is the real version. That's fairly difficult. So what blockchain allows you to do is you can sign the document now, and then what happens is we provide a hash, a cryptographic hash of the document at the time of signing, and that hash is mathematically can be proven that it's unique and unique to any document. So it's essentially a fingerprint of the document at the time of signing, and that fingerprint is stored on the blockchain, not your contract, but just the fingerprint. And so the great thing about that is that it's very cheap, nearly pretty much free. Storing large documents on the blockchain is extremely expensive, so we're trying to keep things very cheap, very free, and you don't have to rely on any third party to do so. So with this cryptographic hash, what happens is afterwards, if there's ever an issue, the two competing parties put their competing documents into a hash generator, and you generate a hash. And from that hash, each party will get a different hash value, right? And so the authentic document will match the original hash that's stored on the blockchain. And it's as simple as that. Currently, if you had to use like an e-signature solution, you're probably gonna have to third-party subpoena them, and that's a world of hurt and a lot of expense, and it's just really not worth it. But with our hash and with the fact that states now are moving towards accepting blockchain records, I think document tampering and kind of forgery is kind of gonna be a thing of the past, because it's nearly impossible to forge nowadays, or at least get away with it if you have this solution in place. And so, sorry, I just kind of skipped that. But so our product is, I'll go back, but the product that we're launching soon is called BlockUSign, BLOKUSIGN. You can sign up for open beta at www.blockusign.com. And it'll be free to use in the next couple months. All right, and so now I'm going to move into smart contracts. So sorry for jumping back and forth, but what is a smart contract? A smart contract is essentially a computer code that's intended to facilitate, verify, or enforce the negotiation and performance of a contract. Essentially, it just executes what was negotiated in a contract. I think everybody actually has new smart contracts. If you've ever had autopay, that's essentially a smart contract. You know, the date your bill comes in, your bank account automatically distributes the funds. That's a smart contract. Here's what a smart contract looks like generally. Just lines of code, if and then statements. And so it's really not a contract. I think we're all attorneys here and we're like, this is not really a real contract. And so my one big gripe about smart contracts is that it's a misnomer really. And it causes a lot of confusion when people use the term smart contract. You know, it's neither a contract nor is it smart. You know, it's completely, you know, well, we'll get to that. And so what is a smart contract then? Yeah, it's just performance. That's all it is. I'm gonna, you know, we can send out my legal analysis after this if you guys are interested, if you want to nerd out with me about it. But all it is evidence of performance. That's really it. And one thing we, Sagewise, try to push for is the use of recording contracts. And that's what everybody generally understands as a contract, is that a legally binding instrument. And so in the crypto and the blockchain world, we have two separate terms. And the term is a recording contract, essentially a legally binding contract that is married with a smart contract. And so again, smart contracts are only as smart as the people who program them. And so in the past year, I'm sure you guys have heard of the news. You know, every couple months, every couple weeks actually, there's news on blockchain and in the crypto space where people are losing tens of $1 million, hundreds of $1 million due to smart contract vulnerabilities. And the main problem for that is that you have people who aren't attorneys, who aren't legally trained, just entering code, you know, and hoping that it'll work. And you know, the philosophy between a programmer and an attorney are two different. The programmers kind of try to work and then fix things as they go, but the problem with smart contracts and sending money out is once that's gone, you can't fix that. It's immutable. It's recorded in the blockchain, it is recorded in a ledger, and you can't get that money back. And so we try to, at Sagewise, we try to think about tools and develop tools to essentially help with some of these vulnerabilities. It's essentially, we develop a toolkit for all smart contracts. So essentially, the best way to think about that is you can write the best and the next great American novel using standard Microsoft Word. It might Microsoft Text. It might take a long time, and you might not have all the tools, but you can absolutely do it. But most people are probably going to use a word processor like Microsoft Word and have all these other tools, and essentially that's what we're doing as well. All smart contracts are going to need the same things, same tools. And so at Sagewise, we think all about that in the instance so that you as a user or anybody essentially using smart contracts doesn't really need to know too much about smart contracts, only that you need to know what you want the smart contract to do, and we provide the tools for you to do it quickly without having to learn all of the coding. Yeah, so I'm nearly out of time, so I'm going to pass it off, and save the rest of the time for question and answers. I'm sure you guys might have a lot of interest. Great. Thank you. Green button.
I'll go next.
Green.
Hey everybody, how's it going? You guys excited for Clio? All right, I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence in the law, and I'm going to talk about beyond BS and hype. And what I mean by that is almost everything you read about and see in artificial intelligence is either over-exaggerated hyperbole or nonsense. And I'm going to try to do something that makes things a lot easier here. We're going to talk about two things during my short presentation. What is AI actually? Put a real definition around it. And then secondly, how can you use it today in your practice to make your practice better? Those are two things I'm going to cover. So first of all, what is AI? The most simple definition of it is that artificial intelligence is a technology that approximates an aspect of human intelligence. Simple as that. And I think part of why artificial intelligence is such a confusing term to so many people is that it encompasses so many different things. It encompasses almost every aspect of how we as humans interact with the physical and intellectual world. Right? Machine learning emulates the aspect of human intelligence that is pattern recognition. Right? Natural language processing understands text, which is actually very hard to do. Right? We'll go into some examples of this in a second. Computer vision, recognizing objects, speech recognition, that's Alexa and Siri essentially, robotics, interacting with the physical world. And as you can probably already tell, there are only some aspects of artificial intelligence that even applies to most law practice. For example, I have no idea if there are any, but I think there are none robotics AI applications to law practice, at least not yet. All right, how is it possible for artificial intelligence to do all of this? Right? And the answer here is also why there's a lot of confusion around artificial intelligence, and that's because there are multiple different ways of approximating aspects of human intelligence. There's expert systems, literally just coding into a program how, if you bump into this wall, turn right, but if you bump into that wall, turn left. And that's actually most applications that call themselves artificial intelligence today are the first category. But there are other types too. Broadly speaking, there are ways you can supervise a machine to learn things. Unsupervised learning, which is you're given a machine a lot of data and it's just supposed to kind of group things usually into different buckets. Reinforcement learning is super interesting. It's where you give a machine or a computer process a goal and it keeps on trying to reach that goal over and over again and does better and better at that goal every time until it's built a way of doing that. So to give you some concrete examples of this, this is an example of supervised learning. And it's an application, I think, developed at MIT that's supposed to teach cars ethical decisions. And it's crowdsourced. You can actually look this up online, look up AI driverless cars. And it asks the really tough question of, if you are the driverless car, what do you do in this circumstance? Do you kill the old lady, pregnant woman, 2 children, and a businessman, right, who are walking across the street, or do you kill the 5 people in the car? And there are literally an infinite number of these scenarios, and it's trying to use data from a crowdsourced system, to figure out a pattern of how ethics should behave in a driverless car experience, right? Here's another example of supervised learning. This is an example that Microsoft released called Tay. As I kind of underlined and read, the more you talk to Tay, the smarter Tay gets, right? The idea here is you give it more information, it kind of feeds it back. A little warning, what Tay actually did was kind of horrendous. So it was only online for about 24 hours. It was mostly denying the Holocaust, because that's the vile stuff that Twitter users put into it. And so the important lesson here is that machine learning is only as intelligent as the data you put into it. This is an example of reinforcement learning. It's the game Mario that is actually being played by a computer system. And what it essentially did is a gentleman programmed Mario to try just different random things over and over and over again, millions of different simulations. And the more it tried to do things like walk forward and jump here, jump there, jump at this point, duck at this point, the better and better it got at beating a level. And now there's a cool video on YouTube you can watch of a machine playing Mario basically flawlessly because it's played thousands and millions of simulations over the course of a single night so it can beat Mario. Here's some other examples of it. There's a driverless car. If you live near me in Mountain View, California, you'll see a lot of these little dorky cars driving around. That's Google's driverless car using machine vision as that approximation of human intelligence, right? There's Siri and Alexa, things that you probably, some of you may use every single day. And I think a really interesting example of artificial intelligence is machine learning is pattern recognition, recognizing things about you to predict what you want to see on your Facebook newsfeed, right? So this is an example of a post that my friend shared at the top of my list because it's about the 49ers, shared by a friend, dealing with law. You can't get it much better for me, right? And that's how it recognized, the machine learning pattern recognized this would be something that I would want to consume. Another example of this is, maybe just ask the audience this. When I ask you guys the question, how is Apple doing today? What do you think that means? Their stock. But how in the world would a machine know that, right? How does it know it's not the fruit, right? How is it doing today, right? Oh, it's sad, happy, right? Natural language processing, when you ask that same question to Google, knows to show me the stock price, right? Google's actually the master of natural language processing. Another approximation of human intelligence, which is very, very hard, right? It knows that I want the company, not the fruit, the stock price, and the stock price today. So let's talk about a few applications of how you can use these different approximations of human intelligence in practice right now. At a high level, the types of things you'll see AI targeting are aspects of your practice where the task is rote and repeated. It takes low-level cognition. Have you ever caught yourself saying, a ninth grader could do this, why am I doing this? That's what AI is focusing on, right? Doing it well does not distinguish you as a practitioner, right? So automate instead of really focus your human attention to it. Clients don't want to pay for it, another great area that's being targeted by artificial intelligence, and it sucks for you to do. These are the kinds of categories of things that artificial intelligence and technologists like myself are trying to attack. And in fact, there are literally hundreds. And this is a great kind of graphic put together by Law Geeks. I don't have time to go into all of this, but there are literally hundreds of applications. To go over a few that I think are really cool, there's a tool called Kira. It's mostly used by very big firms, but it's used by firms of all sizes. And the way that it works is you upload thousands of contracts. Say you're doing a big due diligence project, and you want to review thousands of contracts. It will literally read through and say, this sentence is the assignment term, and this sentence is the term of where the choice of law term, right? It's actually really hard. It usually takes a human level of cognition to read through a contract and understand that this paragraph fits into this category and this paragraph fits into that category. But they've used AI to predict what each paragraph is actually about. And then it can do really cool things, like say, of the 1,000 contracts you uploaded, only one of them has a different choice of law clause for this one employee. And that could highlight for you a danger zone. You should look into it, right? Another example of artificial intelligence that many of you use in tools like Logical and Everlaw is predictive coding. Predictive coding is essentially saying, I've reviewed 100 or 1,000 documents as part of an e-discovery. And as a result of that, we now can say, based on that 1,000 data set, that the next 100,000, of the next 100,000 documents, here are the next 20 you should read, right? And again, it's picking up on the patterns you're feeding into it. This is relevant, this is not relevant, this is relevant, this is not relevant, and the computer starts to figure out, every time the CEO is involved, and every time the CEO is saying, yes, I know this is false advertising, we should do it anyways, whatever, right? Those are the documents that should be most relevant. The New York Times alerts they get in their inbox, not relevant, right? So that's another really great example of AI in practice. Something that we work on is, and I guess the video is not playing, that's okay. And our tool Casetext, our tool Casetext is a legal research platform, right? Not unlike Westlaw or LexisNexis, we have all of the law, cases, statutes, regulations, etc. We use artificial intelligence in a tool called Kara to help you find what you're looking for faster and better. And the way that Kara works is you just have to upload a litigation document like a brief or complaint. Kara will figure out what kind of case you're working on, in what jurisdiction, what are the factual issues involved, and what is the motion at issue, and we'll use that information to make all of your legal research smarter. So you're only looking at more relevant documents and more relevant cases, for example, more relevant regulations, and not less relevant stuff. In fact, a third party called the National Legal Research Group recently did a comparative study using Kara for a few legal research exercises and using LexisNexis for others. And those folks using Kara were both 25% faster at completing a legal research exercise and also found 21% more relevant documents, right? Reason for that? Yes. Reason for that, even though LexisNexis has a 30-year head start on us, is that nothing beats a computer understanding your matter and using that to tailor its search system to everything that you're currently working on right now. So, oh, now it's playing the video. Oh, it's fine. So yeah, this is just it, uploading a complaint and using that to make your search a lot smarter. We'll do questions at the very end. Yeah, thank you. We'll do it very, very soon though, because this is the last slide. What is the future of artificial intelligence in law? I like to call this a Depeche Mode win for clients and for lawyers, which is I believe that in the future, law practice will have better outcomes for clients. They'll be faster and more affordable. And what I mean by that is if you can take certain aspects of your practice that you both bore you and the clients aren't paying for and make your practice more expensive, whether they be e-discovery, contract review, legal research, what have you, then you can start doing things like predict your own costs more predictably, right? And then pass along that predictability to your clients and say, we are actually only going to charge $1,000 for the service flat, right? That's a big deal, as you know, for a lot of your clients. It means that you're able to get through your work a lot faster. For a lot of the big firms that use Casetext, for example, we know that they've started to change some of their employment law litigation matters to flat fee billing because they can now do that. They don't have an unknown quantity of time spent on legal research that could balloon out of proportion. And I also think the really important note here is that you'll be spending more and more of your time doing the kind of work that you went to law school for. Right? Nobody went to law school for e-discovery. Nobody went to law school to read every single word of 10,000 documents that are part of a merger and acquisition for every single contract. Right? You bring a unique amount of intelligence and intuition to every single case. That's the part that you should be focusing on. That's the part that artificial intelligence could take other stuff off the plate for you. So you're focusing on the part that requires human intelligence. So thanks. That's our presentation on artificial intelligence, and I think we have a question and answer period now.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank Jake and Dat again for being great presenters and doing, frankly, a really rushed job on a very technical topic. So I hope it was informative. And now we've got a ton of time for questions. Who was the gentleman who had a question earlier? Here.
Thanks. Question for Jake. So your company does a lot of really cool things.
Thank you.
And what I'm curious about is how you tuned or how you trained Kara. And then I've also seen your company did something, maybe you're still doing it now, but you had like a point system for law students to figure out whether law was still good or red, yellow, green, that type of thing. So you've used human intelligence crowdsourced, you're training AI. Could you just tell us a little bit more about both of those experiences and what you learned from it?
Absolutely. So one of the key aspects of good artificial intelligence is having a good data input, right? Especially if you're doing machine learning that is pattern recognizing. You don't want it recognizing the bad patterns, or else you end up like Tay, right? Denying the Holocaust or whatever. So I can't spill all the beans about exactly how Kara was trained, but I can say this at a high level. We downloaded at least 100,000 real litigations from PACER and state dockets. And we looked at, for example, the opening brief, and then looked at the response brief, and asked questions like, mostly from nationally recognized practices, big and small, nonprofit, for-profit, et cetera. And we asked questions like, if you have this opening brief, what are the cases the opposing brief tends to have in the opposition that the opening brief did not have, right? And that's one really important factor that Kara takes into consideration as part of its training. try to predict the pattern. What is the pattern behind the cases that the opposing brief comes out with, the opening brief didn't? What is the pattern behind the briefs, the cases that the court cites that all the briefs missed, right? Because that might be an important thing too. Those are the kinds of things. That's an example of the kind of pattern recognition. And behind that, what do these cases have in common? Are they newer? Are they from the same jurisdiction? Are they part of the same network of cases that are connected, right? About crowdsourcing for our citator, as many of you who use Casetext know, every case that is overturned in Casetext has a big red flag on it. And that may sound like unexceptional. Of course, like Lexis has that, Westlaw has it. The truth is that if you want to build that with artificial intelligence, what you need to have is an army of law editors, literally thousands or tens of thousands of people inputting data into a system. That is why Lexis and Westlaw are as expensive as they are. The way that we are as affordable as we are, right, way more, like about a quarter to a tenth of the cost of Westlaw, LexisNexis, is that we are able to turn small amounts of inputted data into, from humans, whether they be law students who did it originally for us, or now a small team of attorneys, and turn that into something that scales. And we have 99.5% overlap with Westlaw and LexisNexis in terms of red flags on cases. And let me tell you, some of that 0.5 is not us getting it wrong. It's oftentimes them, misflagging a case. So that's part of that experiment.
Thank you. Do we have other questions about smart contracts or AI? Yeah, down here. I'm gonna shout it out.
Is it too early to tell who the leader in the smart contract platform is going to be? Or do you have a feel for that yet?
And I'm going to repeat the question for the stream. Is there a leader in smart contracts? Dat?
No, there isn't. Right now, it's very early stage in kind of blockchain. There's many competing for kind of the winner-take-all scenario. And so one of the issues that I see, so I can't give you an answer on that, but I'll tell you what things to look out for so you can see maybe this one's got some features that may take the lead. So some issues to look for is that a lot of these blockchains and a lot of these smart contract platforms don't really think about contracting from the lawyer's perspective. And what I mean to say that is about dispute resolution, about governance. And so one of the big issues for failures of smart contracts is there's no governance, they didn't program in a protocol in which if something goes wrong, there's a notification or there's an ability to pause it in the beginning. And even like if you were talking about a smart contract in a large organization, the rights has to be programmed from the beginning. And so if you don't have somebody thinking about those things from the beginning, you're going to have a lot of failures and your smart contract is doomed to fail no matter what. And so I would look for platforms that are focused on identity, governance, and dispute resolution. The industry is slowly waking up to that after over $1 billion of lost value last year due to smart contract failures, right? And there really is no recourse. You can't get that back. And so that's what I would advise you to look for. Yeah.
In terms of like the different crypto blockchain platforms that are out there, like Ethereum versus Bitcoin versus Bitcash, are you recommending any of those?
That sounds like investment advice, which I can't.
No. In terms of the backbone for storing
okay.
the hashes.
I can give you. So one of the things to think about also in terms of like not choosing, but maybe sizing up a blockchain is its central ethos or what it really believes in, right? Bitcoin was originally made just purely for transactions. There are some smart contract capabilities there, and they're building it out, but it really isn't that robust. It was a test project for transferring funds. Really, Ethereum was the first platform that really brought smart contracts to the front. But the issue with one of the things that Ethereum kind of fails at is the lack of governance or the foresight in lack of governance. Again, nearly the $1 billion lost last year was mostly on the Ethereum platform. Again, governance, people are starting to wake up. And so the newer platforms now like EOS is really thinking about governance from the very beginning. They've got a constitution, they've got dispute resolution kind of at least architected or considered from the beginning. And so that's very important because if we're talking about doing business in essentially what is a virtual jurisdiction, you're going to need all of those things considered in the beginning, if not programmed. And so at Sagewise, one of the things was we're like waiting for the industry to kind of catch up, and we realized you can't really wait for these things. And so we're building those protocols and those tools in for our users.
Thank you. And we've got time for one more question.
Can you talk about portability in smart contracts? So since there are a lot of players, we're going to wait to see who, after it shakes out, who will be the best. How portable are these contracts within that ecosphere?
Absolutely. So one of the issues with smart contracts is that they aren't really upgradable. That's kind of because they're recorded on a blockchain. It's pretty much immutable, and so there are movements or there are projects that make smart contracts upgradable and also portable. Right now, there isn't so much portability between the contracts, but there are. I would say within the next year, there will be portability between the larger platforms like Ethereum and EOS.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid we're at time. Dat, Jake, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Cool.